Being the number one pick in the NBA carries with it inherent titles, expectations, and pressures that are instantly placed on the player before they even step foot on an NBA court. Being selected first in your draft class means you're viewed as the best prospect coming into the NBA. But what does it really mean to be selected number one overall when it comes to a player's given career in the NBA? Being the first pick doesn't mean anything until you've been able to prove you've lived up to the hype of being the best player from your draft and were deserving of that first selection. For some players, taken first overall means a guaranteed Hall of Fame legacy, a franchise-changing player, but for others, well, it's a label they never escape, never truly living up to the hype, and forever being given that title as being a bust. But regardless, I thought it would be interesting to go through all the number one picks over the last 25 years, ranking every number one overall pick in order, starting from the worst picks to the best. Of course, if you're new around here and you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe. We are just a couple hundred away from 100,000 subscribers. Let's see if we can get there before the start of the season. Now, I'm going to go through these in reverse order, starting with number 25. And the way I've ranked these is based on the number one pick's career in the NBA, their overall accolades and impact on the game, but also because I'm ranking the number one picks even from the year 2020 all the way to 2024, that also means a handful of number one picks who haven't even entered the prime of their careers yet. And for those players, we're going to go based off of potential from what we know of them as players thus far early in their careers. But at number 25, the worst number one pick of the last 25 years, probably not that much of a surprise, but it's Anthony Bennett. I know some will say, well, what about Greg Oden? What about Markelle Fultz? What about Kwame Brown? Don't worry, I'll be getting to those guys soon as well, but the reason Anthony Bennett was especially bad is that unlike the other guys that I just mentioned, Bennett wasn't a player whose potential and bust factor was in large part due to injuries. Bennett never suffered any major injury that changed the course of his career. He just simply wasn't good enough to be in the NBA. Like, forget even being a number one pick, he wasn't good enough to be in the NBA period no matter where he was drafted. Bennett was inefficient on offense, slow on defense, and never even showed flashes of potential that he was even worth being a number one pick, and would be out of the league after playing just 4 seasons, playing on 4 different teams and averaging 4 points per game. He would be the only number one pick over the last 25 years that wouldn't make it beyond his rookie contract in the NBA. At number 24, this is where I have Markelle Fultz, who was taken first overall in the 2017 draft, a player that had a lot of hype coming into the league, was selected before players like Jason Tatum and De'Aaron Fox. A tragic story of shooting mechanics breaking down and injuries derailing his career and potential. At age 27, he's more or less out of the league, currently a free agent, and wasn't picked up by any team last year until after the trade deadline, where he played a few games for the Sacramento Kings. He was a serviceable starter for a period of time when he was with the Orlando Magic, but nowhere near the expectations of being a number one pick. At number 23, and yes, I'm going through these kind of quickly so this video doesn't become the length of a movie, but at number 23, I've got Andrea Bargnani, who was taken first in the 2006 draft. Bargnani had some nice moments in his career. He actually had a great rookie season where he finished second in Rookie of the Year voting, but for a big man, he was pretty inefficient around the basket with his touch, could not rebound to save his life despite his size. He was a shooting big, which was rare for his time, but outside of some okay three-point shooting, he really did not live up to being the number one pick in the draft, and even despite that, being in a fairly weak draft class. At number 22, this is where I'm putting Kwame Brown, and to be honest, he probably should be a little lower on the list. The only reason I have him slightly higher is because he had a longer career than some of those other busts, and was an okay role player for a period of time in his career. But Brown, who came into the NBA from high school, it was clear he just was not ready for NBA level basketball, and was a prime example for why the league needed to change that rule of players being 1 year removed from high school before being eligible to enter the NBA. Brown never took off as a player, and what makes it worse is that he never truly had any career-ending or career-altering level injuries that prevented him from reaching his true potential. At number 21, I'm going to put Greg Oden here. Look, Greg Oden, as much as people like to say he was a bust, and of course it never helps that Kevin Durant was drafted right after him, but Oden was a beast in college, and had it not been for his legs just giving up on him, he would have been a serious problem in the NBA, but unfortunately, that was never truly realized. We'll never know the type of player he would ultimately become, and because of all of his injuries, he now will forever be remembered as the guy the Blazers took over Kevin Durant. This, of course, a team that took Sam Bowie over Michael Jordan. Now going into the top 20, number 20, I'm putting Kenyon Martin, who was taken first in the 2000 draft. Kenyon Martin actually had a decent career in the NBA, but he was never really a number one pick type caliber player. And a lot of that is because the 2000 draft is known as one of the weakest draft classes in history, but Martin actually made an all-star team in his career, played 15 seasons in the NBA, was a solid defender, one of the better two-way players in his prime, and was a solid contributor on a contending New Jersey Nets team. But yeah, when you compare him to the level of careers other number 1 picks had, it's hard to put him any higher than this. At number 19, this is where I'm putting DeAndre Ayton. Yes, I realize Ayton still has a good amount of his career left ahead of him. I recognize that he's a very skilled and talented player when he wants to be, but his work ethic, combined with his attitude and locker room issues and the fact that he's really not gotten better since coming into the league, I'm putting him much lower than I think some of these other number 1 picks, even though I recognize he still has some of his career left ahead of him. At number 18, probably a forgotten player who was taken first overall, and that's Andrew Bogut. While Bogut had a pretty successful career, a long career in the NBA, he never really broke out into a star, was a role player for a good portion of his career, great defender, solid on offense, but yeah, for a number 1 pick, he would ultimately be a bit underwhelming in terms of his overall career. At number 17, this is where I have Ben Simmons, a player that had such a promising career, a player being touted as the greatest prospect since LeBron James, a franchise-changing player, just did not flourish in the way people thought. He had his moments for sure, 3-time All-Star, All-NBA player, first-team All-Defense, but yeah, injuries and then that playoff series against the Atlanta Hawks where he passed up on the layup in Game 7 because he didn't want to get fouled and sent to the free throw line. He never recovered his confidence after that, never developed a jump shot, and at the time of this recording is unsigned as a free agent and is considering retirement. At number 16, I've got another hyped prospect coming into the draft, another next LeBron level prospect when he was taken first overall in the 2014 draft, and that's Andrew Wiggins. Wiggins has had a solid career, don't get me wrong, always been a serviceable starter, won a championship with the Warriors, reliable scorer, but when you think about Wiggins and how he was viewed as this generational talent coming into the league and you see where his career has taken him today, it has been a disappointment relative to the expectations placed upon him. At number 15, I wanted to put this man higher, but because his career was cut so short, it was hard to do so, and that's Yao Ming. I mean, when Yao Ming was healthy, he was insane. Perennial all-star, was an all-star in his rookie season even, incredible shot blocker, great footwork and agility for a player of his size, but he would only end up lasting 7 seasons in the league, playing just 486 games as his body would eventually give out on him and his career would never recover. But during that short period of time, he was a force and was worthy of that number 1 pick. At number 14, it's tough to put this guy so low when he still has so much of his career left ahead of him, but that's Zion Williamson, who has been plagued by injuries most of his career, a player that had more hype around him than even Ben Simmons or Andrew Wiggins ever did. And yeah, when he's healthy, he's a star. But just based on what we know now of Zion and how his injuries and overall training have impacted his play, I have a hard time seeing him truly break out into a superstar level player that everyone thought that he would become. Number 13, this is an odd one, and it's honestly because I'm not really sure where else to put him because we've only have 1 year's worth of data to assess his career, but that's last year's number 1 pick in Zachary Ricochet. I like Ricochet. I think he could be a decent player, and yes, he was in a weak draft class, but I don't see star level potential from this kid. And when you compare him to some of the other number 1 picks over the last 25 years that I have in front of him, it's hard to put him any higher. Number 12, I've got John Wall, number 1 pick in the 2010 draft, just announced his retirement from basketball. Some are going to say this is too high for Wall, but people forget just how insanely good John Wall was when he was at his peak. An underrated defender, an athletic finisher, killer in the clutch, elite level passer. People will say he didn't impact winning, but that's not really true. He impacted both sides of the ball, and it's not his fault that 1, the Wizards didn't build properly around him, and 2, his career was cut short by injuries like you've seen from a lot of these other number 1 picks that I just talked about. Number 11, and this is where it starts to get tough, as a lot of these guys had great careers or are still having great careers, but I'm going with Blake Griffin here. Insane athlete, human highlight reel, dominant force inside, and even adapted his game later in his career to be a jump shooter, multiple All-Star and All-NBA player. Despite the fact that I have him number 11, I would still consider him worthy of being that number 1 pick. At number 10, I've got Karl-Anthony Towns. Cat is still playing at a high level, so depending on where the rest of his career goes, I could see him jumping a few spots. Like, as much as we like to sometimes call him soft and zesty, he's been a great player that is worthy of the number 1 pick. Double-double machine, 5-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA player, and he still has another good 5 years or so left of his career ahead of him, so I could see him moving up on this list. At number 9, I really wanted to put this guy higher. I really did, but I had to be unbiased here and put Derrick Rose. Absolutely lived up to the hype when coming into the league and became the youngest player to ever win an MVP award, the first superstar for the Bulls since Michael Jordan, elite athlete and slasher to the basket. It's just hard to put him higher when his career was cut so short, and those other guys that I have ahead of him that are in the top 10 either have long ongoing careers or still have a lot of promising years ahead of him. At number 8, and this is where I've got some of the more recent number 1 picks who have shown great promise and are on pace to have incredible careers in the NBA. First off, at number 8, I've got Paolo Banchero here, a clear star already this early in his career, high ceiling having not even entered his prime yet. I think the biggest thing for Banchero is working on his overall offensive efficiency and improving his three-point shot, but he has the tools and mechanics necessary to be a top player in this league. At number 7, I've got Cade Cunningham, number 1 pick the year before Banchero in 2021. Already an all-star as well, struggled with some injuries early on in his career, but had an incredible season last year, showcasing why he was the clear number 1 pick and the Pistons franchise player to build around for the future. Stepping back a few years, at number 6, I've got Anthony Davis, who was taken first overall in 2012, when healthy. A dominant two-way force. The biggest thing that has set Anthony Davis back has been his ability to stay healthy, but regardless, a superstar in this league, multiple All-NBA and All-Defensive selections, one of the most talented big men of his era. At number 5, a man who was just inducted into the Hall of Fame, one of the best big men of his era as well, and that's Dwight Howard. The only reason Dwight isn't higher on this list is because his peak was a bit shorter than others, but when he was at his peak, he was dominant, arguably the second greatest player in the NBA for a brief period of time, only behind LeBron James. One of the greatest defenders of this generation, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year winner, Dwight Howard was definitely deserving of that number 1 pick. At number 4, I'm putting Anthony Edwards here, just an incredibly gifted player, in my opinion, an already established superstar in this league, franchise player for the Wolves, and has made that team relevant again after being on the NBA doormat for so many seasons. At number 3, this is where I'm putting Kyrie Irving. Say what you will about him and some of the off-court issues he's had over the course of his career, but an outstanding career, multiple All-Star selections, NBA champion, one of the clutchest players you'll ever see in the league. At number 2, and this probably doesn't seem fair because he's barely played long enough in the NBA to claim that he's the second best pick of the last 25 years, but that's Victor Wembanyama. And I have him so high because I fully believe he will be the best player in the NBA at some point in his career. He's already the best defender in the league. Already an elite scorer, high-level passer, great ball handling skills for his size. The only thing that will stop Wemby is his body and being able to stay healthy. But as long as that doesn't become an issue, the sky is the limit for this kid. And then at number 1, I mean, should be obvious. I don't know how you can't take one of the greatest players to ever play the game, a 4-time MVP, 4-time NBA champion, and Finals MVP winner, LeBron James, as the greatest number 1 pick, not only of the last 25 years, but the greatest number 1 pick ever in league history. So there you have it. Let me know where you guys would agree or disagree on this list, ranking number 1 picks of the last 25 years. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.